people of the internet, my name is Sabrina and I'm very excited to have you here with me. Today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. So the month of February, just overall as a reading month, was not very good. And I say that more than likely because I was working a lot. I worked an extra like 97 hours throughout the month of February, which is a lot of overtime. And I work an hour away from my house, so I was at work a lot. So I didn't really get a lot of reading done, and I also had a DNF this month, which I don't think I've DNF'd a book in a long time, and I was like 3/4 of the way into it and I was just like, I cannot do this anymore. So my average star rating this month was actually a 4-star, which overall is pretty good, especially with a DNF, but that's my Goodreads star rating, by the way, because I just use that as my averages, which is weird, I know, but oh well. Okay, let's just get into this wrap up. Alright, so I'm actually just going to go in order of the way I read them, so I'm just going to talk about the first book I read all the way up to the most recent book I've read, so let's do it. So the first book I read this month was The Lords of Ink and Shadow by Lena Coakley. This was actually my DNF and I have good reasoning for it, but let's go over what it is about before we go into why I DNF'd it. So this book follows the Bronte sisters and brother, and in it, instead of just writing these stories that are just brilliant, they can go into the story and like live in this world and like live in the characters, and all that's left is like the pen moving on the paper in the room, and it's just it's a good concept for a story, but the way it was executed just wasn't the best. Overall, I just felt like it wasn't executed very well, and it started out really strong, and toward page like 250 or so it started to really die out. I was really bored, so I did end up DNFing it for that reason. Now overall the writing was fabulous and it was written very nicely, it's just the story just really dropped off and I really didn't enjoy it. So I actually rated this a 2-star because it was a DNF. I did enjoy the writing, but I just didn't enjoy the story. The next book I read this month was an audiobook, and it is called If I'm Being Honest by Emma Wibberley. So this book follows a girl who is in high school. She's very popular. She goes to a private school on a scholarship, and she kind of hangs out with all these people that are very rich. Like her best friend is a YouTuber with millions of subscribers, and her other friend is, they're all just rich. They're rich. Big money problems. And she feels like she doesn't belong because her mom is poor, obviously, and her dad is not in the picture. He just kind of sends her money to keep her out of his life, and she's just kind of having these identity issues. So she ends up trying to reconcile all the people she was mean to in order to impress this guy, and through that process she actually falls for one of the nerds she was mean to. So this book is actually cute. I really love the relationship and how that blossomed. I really like watching the main character's development over the story into this very mean girl to this girl that realizes what she did was wrong and she's trying to make it better. Now something I didn't like this story was the fact that everybody was not popular, was like had a name, and I don't even know how to describe this, but the main character was so pretentious, and at the same time she was like, oh, I have no friends, nobody likes me, I don't know where I belong in the world, but then she was like being rude to everybody around her, which did make sense to me, but I am not in that book, okay? I don't know what was going through her mind, alright? I don't know. But that book I ended up rating a 4 stars. I really enjoyed the story and the character development. I don't know. Normally when I rate 4 stars, it's because I just don't feel like it was a 5-star in my book. So that's why it's a 4. The next book I read this month was Speak by Laurie Anderson. So this book I read for my YA literature class, and it was phenomenal. I loved this book. So this book follows, I cannot remember her name, Melinda, and she is a high school senior, and this book follows Melinda, and Melissa is a high school freshman, and she's kind of trying to figure out where she belongs because she was at this party and she called 911 because she felt like she was in a very uncomfortable situation, and now the whole school's mad at her because they found out she was the one that called 911, and it was under very good reason, okay? And I don't want to say too much, but I don't want to explain it, but it just talks about her dealing with trauma and dealing with the grief of the trauma throughout this freshman year, and this book was incredible. I cried when as I'm reading about her story and her just kind of getting over this trauma. It was very touching, and I absolutely love this story. I am going to put this in my classroom when I start to teach because this is just so compelling. It's definitely one of those stories that I feel like would help somebody that is going through a situation like this, because it is such a common experience, which is so disgusting to be able to say, but it's such a common experience through teenagers with not knowing about full consent, no means no, and things like that. So I'm just very excited. I loved this book so much. This book I ended up rating a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. The next book I read was Unpregnant by Jenny Hendricks. So this book follows a girl who was impregnated, that sounds terrible, by her boyfriend. And I say she was impregnated because he was very upset because she was going to college across the country and he didn't want her to leave. So he poked his little holes in the condom and got her pregnant, and she did not want this. So she ended up going to call Planned Parenthood, and unfortunately where she lived you had to have a parent's permission, and she did not want to tell her parents. So this is the story of her 1,000-mile journey to an abortion clinic where she did not have to have a parent's permission. Now this book was amazing. I loved it. We follow this 16-year-old girl who's very confident in herself, good boyfriend, she has a great family, she has, well, an okay family, but still, and then she has awesome grades, she's getting ready to go to one of these huge Ivy League colleges, she's doing fantastic for herself, and then her boyfriend does something that is detrimental. So this is her trying to make sure her plans don't get off-railed, and she wants to make the best life possible for herself, so she tags along with her ex-best friend with blue hair and travels across the country. And this is just a book full of friendship, full of love, and I absolutely loved this book. I would highly recommend it to anybody. It is on Scribd if you listen to that audiobook service. It was incredible, and I rated this book a 5 out of 5. The next book I read was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. This book follows a girl who is a dog walker, and she's kind of moved to this new town, and she walks all these dogs in this like super rich neighborhood, and she ends up meeting this guy one day that almost runs her over, and they hit it off. So very quickly they become like really intertwined in each other, and she realizes that his wife had passed away in a boating accident with her best friend. And she finds out a lot of things about this guy and his wife, and let me tell you something. This book was very predictable. Like, if you think your tragic murder story, but you know the victim from the beginning, this is the book. This is the book. It's just so generic. Now, saying it's generic does not mean I didn't like it. I did enjoy the storyline, but I just felt like it was something that I've read so many times. It's like, I needed a new storyline, okay? And this just wasn't it. I ended up rating this book a 4 out of 5 stars just because it was very generic and something that I've read before, but I did really enjoy it. The next book I read this month was The Long Way Down, the graphic novel by Jason Reynolds. This book made me fucking cry, like sobbing in my bed at 2 in the morning, okay? So this book follows a boy whose brother is a victim of gang violence, and because of this, he follows these rules, and one of these rules is if someone kills your family member or your friend, you have to go kill them. So he is on the elevator on his apartment building going ready to go kill this man that killed his brother. But on the way, it stops at every single floor, and at every floor, the ghost of someone he knows who is shot down by gang violence comes in the elevator and talks to him. This book, I'm going to cry again because this book was amazing. The graphic novel hits you differently because it kind of shows you just imagery of everything that's happening, of the drive-by shootings, of everything, and it is so incredible. I loved this story, and the fact that this is a common occurrence, it is happening in our world now. We have gang violence every day where we have 14-year-olds who are learning to shoot a gun because they have to protect themselves from other gangs, and that is just incredibly sad. But this book is so compelling, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. I ended up rating this a 5 out of 5 stars because this book is just absolutely stunning. The next book I read this month was an audiobook, and it was called Somewhere Only We Know by Maureen Gu. So this book follows a really popular K-pop star, and she is getting ready to make her American debut, and she is in Hong Kong, and right after her show she takes some sleeping medication and then decides she really would like a hamburger, so she sneaks out of her hotel room and gets herself into some trouble, and this guy ends up taking her home because she seems very drunk. He takes her home and lets her sleep it off at his house, only for him to realize that she is a international pop star and he's a journalist, paparazzi, whatever you want to call this man. Yeah, and he takes advantage of that. So he decides he's going to write a story called The Real Lucky, which is her name, and then takes all these pictures of her and lies to her and takes her around Hong Kong to spend this day with her so he can have the story. Along the way, they fall in love with each other. This book is so cute. It brought a lot of Korean aspects that I was not familiar with, like Korean phrases and Korean food that I wasn't acquainted with, and this book was so cute. I loved it. I loved Lucky. She had such this adorable personality, and throughout the story and throughout experiencing all these things with Jack, she learns a lot about herself, and which is amazing, and you can see that progression through the story. I loved this book, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 just because the ending felt very rushed. It was just kind of like boom, end, epilogue, and I don't like when they do that. I like to have like a nice well-rounded ending, and I just didn't get that with this book. The next book I read was There Is Someone Inside Your House by Stephanie Perkins. So this has been on my TBR for a long time, and I've actually included it in my winter TBR, which I uploaded 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So this book follows Makani, I can never say her name, Makani Young, and she comes to live with her grandmother in Nebraska from Hawaii ever since a big accident happened that involved her, so she just needed to get away. So while she's there, a murderer is going through town and killing people in her high school, and it's a book, let me tell you. So it's written in third person, which is absolutely fine if it didn't jump around as much as it did. We jumped around a lot, and we would be like in the middle of a story, then all of a sudden, just kidding, we're gonna go to this person now. And I'm like, but something I really did enjoy was everyone who got murdered, they put it in their point of view, so you could like watch them get murdered, but the murders are like actually super gruesome as well. So if you don't like gruesome, scary things, I probably wouldn't recommend this book, but I really did enjoy this book for the most part. It's just there was a lot of things that you were sitting there and you were like, and it just didn't make sense. But overall, I did enjoy it. I ended up giving it a 3.5 just because I felt like it was super jumpy, and you find out who the murderer is halfway through, and then from there it's just like the story kind of drags a little bit. I did enjoy this book, but I just feel like it didn't deserve the hype it got, okay? That's all I have. And the next book I read was Dear Martin by Nick Stone, and this book is about a boy named Justice, and Justice is a very smart boy. Why couldn't I get that out? And he is called to help his girlfriend, who is belligerently drunk, and she is a light-skinned black woman, which is relevant because he goes and helps her and is trying to kind of force her in the back of the car. She's belligerently drunk because he wants to just take her home so she doesn't make a scene, and the cops think he is kidnapping her. So they put him in handcuffs, and this kind of sparks a change in Justice. So he starts to write these letters to Martin Luther King because he is such a prominent figure in civil rights. So Justice is just kind of trying to grapple with his friends being murdered, and his friends being murdered in cold blood, and all these articles in the news of police brutality and black men and women being treated like criminals. And it's just a kind of a first person retelling of things like this, and I'm going to cry because I bawled my eyes out in this book several times. I had to compose myself because honestly, parts of this book hit me so hard I'm literally gonna cry again, because there's a scene in this book where he's with somebody who gets murdered, and it just hits you a certain type of way, and it's amazing. And I think something about this book is that what's really real about it is these kind of things are still happening, and black men and women in America especially are still being treated like it's 1825, and it's just not okay, and we all need to stand up for them, and we all need to stand together and kind of put an end to this, because I could never imagine my best friend, who is a straight A student, being put into handcuffs just because they're black. That is so scary, and that is so wrong. This book was absolutely stunning. I gave it a 5. I'll give it a 15 out of 5 if I could, because justice, it was just amazing. The gang culture that is around his city, the police brutality, how the media makes young black men look in the media. It's just, this book, amazing. I don't have words for how amazing this book was. I am thinking about doing a review on it just because I loved this book. It was so good. I need to stop talking about it, I'm gonna cry. Next book. And the very last book I read was Love Letters to the Dead by Ava de la Vera, if I'm saying that correctly, I hope. So this book follows a girl named Laurel, and her sister passed away in a tragic accident. And because of this, she's kind of just trying to navigate life and trying to figure out who she is without her sister. So she ends up going to this different school and meeting all these new people, but throughout this book she is writing letters to dead people. So famous dead people like Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, just a lot of different people, and this book was something. I don't think the whole letters to these dead famous people had to be as prevalent, because it was like every chapter it started with Dear Kurt Cobain, and then some chapters it didn't even like mention anything other than their name, and there was no like, oh, well, you went through this and so did I in some of the chapters, and then some of the chapters it was just like a whole monologue. I don't know what this book was about, and I didn't really enjoy it, to be honest. I thought the main character was very pretentious. I think she was really snotty. She was very like, oh, my sister died, now I can't talk about it, and I have to feel some type of way and then not talk to anybody anymore because I hate everybody. And I'm like, man, you're being super dramatic and I really don't appreciate it. But overall, I just felt some type of way about this book, so I ended up giving it only a 3.5 out of 5. I felt like it could have been a lot better if we just threw out the whole writing love letters to dead musicians. It would have been so much better. Like, just like in Dear Martin, we had a letter to Martin and then experience. Letter to Martin, experience. I think we could have done that, but we didn't. It's fine, but yeah. Okay, so that is gonna be the end of my February wrap up. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure you give it a super big thumbs up. Make sure you comment down below and tell me the books you read this month, or if you've read any of these books. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you like this video. I upload every Monday and Thursday at 11:45 a.m. Eastern time, and make sure you click that little bell to get notified when I upload, because I upload on those days at those times. And I will see you guys in my next one. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. Bye!